Assalamu alaikum. I'm an American who converted to Islam, here to clear some things up because this debate no longer seems to be about facts. It's about assumptions being presented as facts. I think you're misunderstanding, maybe intentionally. When I talk about Paran, you're saying that I said Makkah is Paran, and no, Paran is an entire region and it spanned a big area. Paran is Sinai, Jordan, and northwest Arabia in the Hijaz region. This is documented in ancient Egyptian sources, referred to as Shasu lands. So my statement's accurate. Mecca is in the Paran region, which covers all of that. Now let's focus on your main argument, which is Hagar and Ishmael could not have made it to Mecca because they only had one skin of water. This is addressed in the Bible. Looking at Genesis 14:15, yes, she had to put Ishmael down. She ran out of water, but that's not where it ends. You need to keep reading. Genesis 21:17-19 is crucial here. This is when God hears Ishmael's crying, Hagar's eyes open, and there's a well in front of them. This is always conveniently ignored by people who bring up the skin of water argument. From the very beginning of this journey, it was clearly sustained by divine intervention, which the Hadith goes further detail in if you cite it. It's Hadith 3364 in Bukhari. So if you're denying the divine intervention of the well appearing, that's fine, but you're not denying Islam, you are denying Genesis. Then there's the argument that Paran must be Sinai because Moses was there in numbers, but this is, again, only assumptions. Paran is a region, and the regions at this time spanned hundreds of miles with borders that were not nearly as clearly defined as they are today. Early historical source Eusebius from the 4th century places Paran outside of Palestine toward Arabia, and Jerome links Paran with Ishmaelites, Arabs. If you're placing a modern projection onto it, you are not going off of scripture. Now let's talk about how Israel traveled from Paran to Canaan and back in 40 days, so it can't be Mecca. The problem here is that Israel was already stationed in a location called Paran, but it doesn't tell you at all how big that region was. And at this time, a lot of the regions would tend to overlap with each other because the names of the regions moved with the people. This is a very common tribal thing, and this is actually taught in Arab school systems, which we wouldn't learn in the US. So now let's zoom out a little bit. Isaiah doesn't only mention Paran, he also mentions Kedar, Ishmael's son. I did an entire breakdown of Isaiah from chapter 1 to somewhere in chapter 40, a video or two back, if you want to catch that and then come back to this one. Just to summarize, Isaiah basically comes to reject the old covenant, and God rejects the worship from that covenant. And then in Isaiah 42:11, it talks about a new song and specifically says, let the settlements where Kedar lives rejoice, let them shout from the mountaintops. So now let's just think, when did Israel or Jesus proclaim a new law from the wilderness of Kedar with a worldwide global proclamation, people chanting and shouting from the mountaintops? There's no historical evidence of that, except in Islam. Muslims have a call to prayer all around the world, pilgrimage chants, which occur in the mountains and valleys in Mecca. It's just pattern recognition, friends. Let's think again. If Ishmael never went to Arabia, where did Kedar's people come from? Genesis says Ishmael became a great nation. Isaiah explicitly names Kedar. Muhammad is from Quraysh. Quraysh traces back to Ishmael. You are free to reject Islam. That hurts no one but you. What you cannot reject is the genealogy, geography, and prophecy without also rejecting the Bible. Because again, I was only using the Bible, ancient historians, geography, and some logic. Islam just gives you more detail about the events and more detail about Ishmael specifically, since the Bible focused mainly on Isaac. And Ishmael marrying a woman from Egypt doesn't mean that he couldn't have also married a woman from the Jurhum tribe. People back then had many wives. It was a very common thing. So that doesn't disprove anything. It's just another assumption being presented as a fact. So ultimately, this debate is not about distance, it's about whether or not you accept divine intervention. Don't call assumptions facts, and don't ignore verses that dismantle your entire argument. Read the text, follow the evidence, and let God's message connect the way that it was always meant to.